Man, that introduction is probably longer than my speech. Good morning, how are y'all doing?
Good morning.
Look, I understand that we're all reserved in here, and we're all dignified, and we have on our good clothes this morning, but there's a reality that I want to make sure that we acknowledge before I start speaking. Somewhere this morning in this country, kids as young as these were murdered throughout our communities. As young as these throughout our country, there were kids in prison as young as these. Throughout our communities, throughout this country, there were kids became victims of drugs, violence, and crime throughout this country, and ultimately a lot of our communities. So make a little noise for the graduating class. And if you are a parent or a grandparent, please stand. And now, class, I want you to make noise for your grandparents and your parents who are here to support you. The reality is we cannot do this alone. I fundamentally believe in the quote, "It takes a village to raise a child." I am so very honored to be able to come and share my story, my truth with you this morning. And I promise you I will not be long at all. I didn't even prepare or bring a speech because I understand that after 10 minutes, the kids won't hear anything I'm saying, and after 15 minutes, they'll be mad. So I will be very brief, but very honest and very transparent about my truth and give you all some knowledge as you move forward. You know, I also want to make sure that you understand that this should not be the last time you walk across the stage or receive an award. This should actually be your lunch. This is not your landing. And in fact, in the words of your guide, go ahead and put a date on it. You know, 4 years from now, around this time, you should be walking across the stage again. So go ahead, put it in your mind, put a date on it, and as you prepare to move forward in your endeavors. And as I come and as I speak to each of you, as you are transitioning on to your next steps, I would like to say that education was important for me. I would like to be up here and say that education was always valued in my home, and I had parents who graduated from high school. I did not. Education was not important for me. It was not something that was emphasized in my home. However, I became who I am today, first and foremost by the grace of God, but through other people believing in me and pushing me towards my North Star, ultimately what I wanted to be absolutely true for myself. And if I was completely honest with you, I would, tell you that by the time I had reached the third grade, I was required to repeat the third grade. So I failed the third grade. By the time I reached seventh grade, I was placed in what is referred to as LD back then, but special education classes for behavior and speech issues. By the time I reached 10th grade, I had failed science and math. And I remember going to Ms. Robbins, the counselor at Viagra High School, as we were preparing our schedule for the next year. And I remember telling Ms. Robbins, look, the reality is I'm only here now, so my mom won't go to jail. Once I reach the age of majority, which would have been the next year, I'm not going to continue school anymore. I'm going to drop out. I am done. This is it for me. Ms. Robbins convinced me in a very long and emotional speech, Freddie, I see a lot of you. I see a lot of potential in you. Don't drop out. She convinced me instead to run for junior class president at Viagra High School. She said, there is a lot of potential in you. There's a lot of leadership in you. Run for office. I remember looking at Ms. Robbins saying, look, there is no way that these folks are going to vote for me to be junior class president. Weirdly enough, I gave them bait. I told them, hey, we're going to have out of uniform day. We're going to have parties every month. We're going to have National Skip Day every year. And they drank the Kool-Aid and they voted for me. I then became junior class president. And that was like for the first time in my life, I began to see myself as a leader. I began to see myself beyond the circumstances and the situation that I saw in Happy Hill. And not coming from a perfect home or a perfect community, I understand that as you grow up in that type of environment, as you grow up in a society that tells you that you're less than, you begin to internalize that and you begin to feel that. And so as I speak to you today, I want to encourage you to never let anyone tell you that you are less than anyone else in this country or in this world. You deserve every opportunity to be your very best self as anyone else. I then went on to the next year study for the ACT. So at this time, my friends have changed. I'm in a different circle of folks as junior class president, and everyone is talking about where they're going for college. And so I'm like, well, I'm going to college too. I then go talk to Ms. Robbins, studied for the ACT for maybe a day, went and took the ACT that Saturday morning and made a 16. A 16 on the ACT. You all probably can score higher than 16 right now. And so I began to think about, like, what am I going to do? Like, I can't get in college with a 16 on the ACT. But I think about the words of Paul in the Bible when he said, even when I was nothing in my own eyes, God promoted me. And I remember praying, and I remember saying, look, I'm going to college. And I remember applying to about 5 colleges with 16 on the ACT. And I said, I know that they're probably not going to take it, seriously. I had people call the admissions offices at colleges, every single college that I applied to, and I called for about 2 weeks straight after I submitted the application. I was admitted into every college that I applied to. And that speaks to, look, you can't give up. You can't allow your current circumstances or situation to dictate. You have to really, really, really fight for what you want. And it's not going to be easy, but as long as you fight, I assure you, God will fight for you. I went on to graduate from Alabama A&M University, the best university in the entire country. As you put a date on it and matriculate through high school, I hope that you will consider Alabama A&M University as the best university in all of the land. I then went on to graduate and attend and graduate from Stanford University Cumberland School of Law. And I often tell this story because it's important to me, and I don't want to offend anybody in the room, but it's my truth. If this offends you, don't get mad at me, get mad at my truth. Mind you, before going to Stanford, my education and my academics were different. I went to Glendale Elementary in Pritchard. I had only been around people who looked like me, black folk. I then went to Mobile County Training Middle School in Africtown Plateau. I had only been around people who looked like me. At Viger, I can't think of a non-black person, maybe 2, that I was in class with. At Alabama A&M, it's historically black college and university. For the most part, I was in class with only black folk. But going to Stanford, which was literally the whitest place I had ever been in my life, it was a culture shock for me. But also, it was training for me. It was development for me. And in that short time that I was on Stanford campus, I had to learn that this was my world too. And everything that I wanted to be true for myself, I had to fight for, and I also had to speak my truth. And so I say that to you, never ever be afraid to speak and say what is important to you. You have to be able to be uncomfortable, put yourselves in situations that you can speak your truth and tell your story. And this is my story. And I'll leave you with 3 things as I close out. We're getting to 10 minutes. 3 things that I never ever want you to forget. One is, don't forget lessons. There's a quote that some lessons will be repeated until you learn them. And I assure you that is the case. Be very mindful of who you surround yourself with. As it was stated in my introduction, I was a prosecutor for some time here in Mobile County. And I would prosecute folk and have cases with people who were literally in the wrong place at the wrong time because they decided to hang around and be influenced by their friend. And the way the laws are written in this state, if you're with someone who murders somebody, you're just as guilty in some circumstances as they are. So be very careful of who you surround yourself with. Only surround yourself with people who want the best for you and who want you to succeed. So never forget those lessons. The second thing I want you to never forget is your legacy. Understand that you are only here today, you're only sitting in these seats because people fought for you. Some of those people were your parents, some of those people were your grandparents, some of those people were your teachers. And you can never take that lightly. Never forget the legacy of people who fought to put you where you are. And the last thing I want you to never forget is your Lord. Never forget that you are only here by the grace and the goodness of God. And as you move forward, I assure you, you will have some very hard days. You will not always be as celebrated and appreciated, and you will never feel, or you will not always feel as happy as you feel right now. But I assure you, if you never, ever, ever forget who you are and whose you are very, very, very good. Never forget that God has brought you a mighty long way, and he will certainly continue to carry you. Thank you so much for having me. I am honored to be here. Thank you. I'm proud of you, and I look forward to what you do next. Thank you.